Hello there, and welcome to Beyond the Surface, where the saying to be seen is to be understood comes to life. I want to begin by first honouring the traditional custodians of the land we live and work on. I live and work on Gundungurra land, and I acknowledge the traditional landowners of my guests near and far. I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions, and cultures of our First Nations people. The land below my feet is, was, and always will be Aboriginal land. I'm no stranger to the profound journey of pain, grief, anger, and heartbreak that often accompanies the loss of church, community, faith, and the unwinding of our core beliefs. In the midst of this, though, I found healing in the stories shared by others who walked a similar path to me. Here, in the warmth of these digital walls, I want you to feel at home. This is a space where your memories and your story is not just acknowledged, but deeply seen and believed. So kick back, relax, and let's embark on a journey where your story is not just heard, but embraced. I want to welcome you to a community where storytelling is a powerful force. This is Beyond the Surface. Welcome, Rachel. Thanks for joining me. Now I am going to give a little context for people as to how I know you, which is that we studied together in a Christian counseling college. And people who, by the time this gets released, my ebook will be out, which has a bit about my story. And there is a little section in there around the course and some of the problematic stuff that happened there also. But that is, I guess, a little brief context as to how we know one another. But tell me, where does your story start?
Where does my story start? Well, it's sort of a two-part story. I grew up in the church, the Uniting Church.
Mm.
My dad was a minister, and so that was pretty chill. The Uniting Church, in my understanding and my experience, is pretty chill with people's gender
Mhm.
and all sorts of things. They're a very chill denomination. But then we did all the right things, married my first boyfriend. I'm still married to him, but um, and then had the babies and did the things. And then after the kids were older, did the study,
Mhm.
and we then switched from the Uniting Church to a Baptist church, and then we went to an independent Pentecostal church, and then we went to Bible college.
Mm.
So that was different. And then we moved to Victoria and went to, I suppose you could call it an independent evangelical
Mhm.
church. That was probably when things really started to fall apart.
Evangelical churches tend to do that. Um, what was it like growing up as a minister's kid?
So I was a minister's kid in the 90s, 80s and 90s, in regional outback Queensland. So there
Mm.
were six other girls my age, and they all seemed skinny and sporty, and I'm a kind of cuddly, nerdy animal person.
Yeah. Yep.
So I felt I couldn't swear.
Mm.
I couldn't even say vagina. I
Mm.
couldn't,
Yeah.
it was very hush hush, especially in a small country town. Like I think there were 1,000 people there. And then we moved to Townsville, and dad joined the military. So then he was a military chaplain. So it
Right.
was a bit more chill because he wasn't quite so focused on the family in the church. But going to church, we were the minister's family. And
Yeah.
so we had to be very well behaved. Although I don't think we really were.
But it
Uh,
doesn't, I guess it doesn't remove that the standard that you would need to uphold.
yeah, I couldn't be a pain in the bum. I
Mhm.
couldn't. I was the eldest as well, eldest daughter, a younger sister, and then a quite younger brother.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, being the eldest daughter, I looked up to my dad. I still do. He's cool, but it was yeah, it was challenging. I felt I didn't really have many friends, and I'm not sure if that was because I was a minister's daughter or because I was a weird nature girl.
Mhm. I mean, maybe a combination of the both.
I mean, I did have some friends, and some of them I
Uh,
still have contact with, but they were also the weird nature people.
right. Okay. So maybe it was more the minister's kid thing then. Okay.
um,
So how did you land in, like, what was your faith like as a teenager growing up?
until we moved from Townsville to Canberra, so that was a military move. I hadn't really thought about it. I thought like, of course, I
Mm,
was a Christian. You know, when I was 4, I prayed the prayer, and Jesus was my imaginary friend as I walked down the hall holding hands with him.
yeah.
Um, yeah, you know, of course, I was Christian. And then I moved to Canberra and started going to a youth group at Uniting Church. And that was kind of the first time I came across the purity culture concept. It was like the late 90s.
Mhm.
Um, but by then I'd already met the man I'm now married to. And he went to an independent Pentecostal church.
Mm,
And we were madly in love, typical 16, 17, 18 year olds, like,
mm,
and relatively, like, we weren't very chaste in some ways, but we did to be very pure, but
yeah.
we tried.
I
Um,
mean, purity culture just screws shit up, right?
oh my gosh, I know so many people. So I think, got together just before our church started to really press it. The dating
Mm,
don't.
hmm.
That was a literal thing. And there were couples who we didn't even know were dating, and then they got engaged.
Yeah.
Um, and they didn't kiss until they got married, that sort of thing. Whereas we kissed, we mucked around, we
Mm.
just normal, I think,
Yeah, just a typical teenage relationship.
but with a lot of added shame.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, we started going to that church. There was all the purity culture stuff.
Mm.
We just kind of played along, kind
Yeah.
of. Um,
I mean, and for people who don't know, like, you're at a uniting church and he's at a Pentecostal church. I mean, they're like light years
they
apart.
are,
Like, they are so far apart from one
yeah.
another.
And his mum grew up Catholic, so
Oh my gosh. Yeah, okay.
she would. So even though my church was the one doing the purity culture,
Mm.
my mother-in-law would keep us awake until 3 in the morning lecturing us about that we were going to Uniting Church.
Mm.
That was the wrong church. But also B, sex.
Yeah, okay.
Not in my house, and all that stuff. And that actually ended up damaging my relationship with my mother-in-law, and it's been 25 years.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
mean, there's a whole bunch of other stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like rules are very at the fore, they're very fundamental to Catholicism, right? It's all very like there's a bunch of rules that you are designed to follow.
And
Um
I was not Catholic in the least.
yeah, I know that because I mean, I only did like a whole 3 years at a Catholic school, but it's enough to it's enough in period, but it's enough to tell you that rules are very central and rules are meant to be followed.
Yeah. Even though she's not Catholic anymore, or
Yeah.
that isn't, I don't know how the phrasing is there. She
Mm,
goes to Pentecostal church.
yeah.
She obviously is still someone who's very rule orientated, and you have to do the thing. And we did not do the
Yes.
thing.
Okay. Yeah. And so I'm assuming that you did the good Christian thing, which was get married young.
Yes, I was 19.
Right. Okay.
And Adrian was my first boyfriend. Well, I'd had a boyfriend. I think we kissed once.
Mm,
Yeah, but Adrian and I were each other's first boyfriend and girlfriend, and yes, we got married not young. I was 19 in my second year of uni
mm,
doing environmental science, and he was working in a food court
okay.
making some fast food.
Oh,
Um,
I mean,
and
that's a very vital thing to do, to be fair.
it is, and he can
Yeah.
still cook really good pasta,
Yeah.
which is a vital thing.
Yeah.
Um, but we had no money
Yeah.
because I was at uni. But we had to get married because
Mm.
if you're in love, then obviously you have to get married because you want to shag.
Yeah. And marriage is often, other than I mean, there's the whole sex thing, but marriage is put on a pedestal, right?
So,
Because that's the goal.
yeah. Neither of his siblings have married. Um,
I bet that grieves the mother-in-law's heart
yes,
deeply.
and then also there's only one other
Oh,
grandchild. Again,
okay.
the grief. Um,
Mm,
and because marriage just seemed too much for them,
mm.
the siblings. But I mean, my
Yeah.
siblings and I, we're all married now, but it didn't do the same progression.
Yeah. Okay.
We only moved in together when we got married, and
Mm.
so
And so, did you end up at the Pentecostal church or did he end up at the Uniting church?
look, we've been back. Yes, we did go to the Pentecostal church for a while.
Right. Okay.
So it was an independent Pentecostal, and then I mean, I remember sermons that would go for 3 hours, and I
Mm,
have no idea what they were talking about. Um,
yeah.
but
Okay.
it was like all of Sunday was church.
Mm,
And Adrian, that's my husband, at the time was working. He only had Saturday afternoons and Sundays off. So that was our day off, go to
right.
church.
Okay.
So it was not, but you had to go to church. How
Mm.
could you not? You know?
Yes, because the notion of any sort of belief or faith outside of going to church is just not heard of, right?
You're either going to church or
Mm,
you're lapsed, you're a sinner. Were
mm,
you ever a Christian in the first place? Apparently,
mm.
um, it's either or.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, very black
What
and white.
was what was your time like at the Pentecostal church? Because I would imagine it would have been starkly different.
It was really different. The whole, speaking in tongues and
Yeah.
blessing in the spirit and dance, all that stuff. And I didn't grow up with any of that.
Mm,
To me, that was like, huh?
yeah.
Um, and I just remember like going to some church and there was a lady who was barking like a dog who was just behind me. And I remember thinking, if this is from the spirit and it's making me deeply uncomfortable, how
Mm,
come the spirit, God, is making her bark like a dog to the point where I am distracted and
yeah.
not paying attention to what's happening? I'm not in the
Mm,
spirit because I'm here going, what the hell? Um, and that was, I think, probably one of the first times that I started to really question some of that sort of thing because I was like, why is there such a dichotomy? Like, if cool for her that she wants to bark like a dog, I mean, I'm sure it's just echolalia or whatever, but how does that people justify these things?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was really different going to a Pentecostal spirit church. Then we went back to the United Church. Um, and I worked for the United Church actually doing like admin in the office, office lady, hi.
Hmm.
Um, and then I had babies because
Mm.
that's what you need.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Step two of the good Christian girl thing to do is marry, yeah, and then have
Listen to the question.
babies. Right. Okay. And so what was it like for you to start having questions?
um, I think no, it felt shameful.
Mm,
You shouldn't question these things. Oh, it was the minister's daughter. We'd been, and we. had been and were going to Bible college. Bible college was probably where we started to question the most.
I know, it's so ironic, isn't it?
It is. It's very ironic.
Yeah.
So I think I hadn't really been around evangelical Christians until we went to Bible college
Okay.
or Anglican. I'd been mostly Uniting Church and Pentecostal, at least, that in my experience, they didn't bother about what your gender was.
Yeah.
It was your gifting in the spirit and your training that mattered to them. So it
Mm,
was when we went to the Bible college and realized that there are people who believe women, just
mm.
because they're women, shouldn't teach or work or so many different things.
I mean, it's that complementarianism, I guess, that
Yeah,
you get out of a fundamental religion.
that
Yeah.
was that was a culture shock.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
because that was not my experience with the United Church
Mm,
or even the Pentecostal church. Like his mum, Adrian's mum, would lead communion or whatever, but there was no way that
mm.
was going to happen.
Yeah.
So I
Okay.
was, yeah. Anyway, I lost track of where the question was.
That's okay. I mean, how did you land in Bible college in the first place?
Um, so we were kind of tootling along, and then we had a housemate who she was a missionary daughter, so her parents had been missionaries, and and that was kind of talking with her. She was a really good housemate, really easy to talk with. Um, and that's kind of when what you would call my faith really kicked off,
Hmm.
because it's been a sort of a late bloom and then a quick
Ah,
it's like just a slow burn, real slow burn, and then a real slow burn. Um, and so we just talked, and I was convicted of, the fact I going back a bit, whenever Adrian led communion or leading worship or whatever, it's like he glowed.
mm,
And I could tell that he needed to do something like that.
mm.
But I had been burnt by the fact that my dad was in ministry and I never wanted to be a minister's wife. So I
Yeah.
was like, hell no.
Mm,
But then I got to the point where I was like, you know what? I think he's got to do that. He's at least we've got to train in theology.
okay.
And I was sitting at the table one day with my mum, and I was like, I think I'm just gonna have to just let go and let God, that cliche.
Yeah.
Um, so
What was it about being a minister's wife that you so desperately didn't want?
um, I knew it had been hard for my mum to be the
Hmm.
minister's wife. She was not the classical minister's wife. She was a little bit outspoken, no desire to be involved in children's ministry, not even really in women's ministry. Um, couldn't play music, couldn't, all those traditional things. She could bake, she makes really nice cakes and stuff.
Hmm.
So that was, but it was really hard on her because dad's brain and energy was always elsewhere, out there with the congregation. Everything that was going on with the congregation took
Mm.
on, like, it was here. He didn't so much love the preaching, but the pastoral side of things, that was him. He loved it, connecting and feeling useful and worthy, and that really ticked all his boxes. And I
Yeah.
could see that Adrian as being somewhat extroverted. That was, he loved all that stuff too. And I was like, I could just see how much it would cost mum because dad's brain was elsewhere, and he'd come home and he'd be tired, or we'd just sit down to eat dinner and the phone would ring again because someone else was having a crisis, always at dinner time somehow.
Mm. Yeah.
And I did not want that. Um, and I think it just caused a lot of pain.
Mm.
There's stuff that it's not my story to tell, but it caused a lot of pain, and that's why he got into the military.
Yeah.
Kind of went, no, and that was that. So he joined the Air Force as a chaplain. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you put aside all of those fears and all of that oh
Yep.
gosh, please let this not happen to me and my family. And you went to Bible
We
college.
went to Bible college.
Hey.
And so Adrian was studying theology. I was studying how we met, the therapy.
Yep.
My eldest would have been, I think, finished year 4, 5, and 6 were in Sydney.
Hmm.
The youngest was 2 years younger than that. So, still primary school age kids, but older primary school. And off we went to Sydney,
Mm-hmm.
from Canberra to live on campus with 100 other people. It was like being in a church or school camp for 3 years,
Yeah.
lunch and dinner with 100 to 400 other people every day.
Mm.
And yeah, we went to Bible college,
Okay.
and none of us were diagnosed with anything that we're now diagnosed with.
Oh boy. It's so ironic
Yeah,
because, I think a lot of people, and I did what was called a gospel gap year straight out of high school, which was basically, it was just a few units of a Bachelor of Theology coupled with a whole bunch of mission work, right?
that's
Um,
awesome.
and um, and I think most people go into either something like that or they go to Bible college, I guess, with the assumption or the hunger to learn more and to grow in faith more. Um, and I find that that's not really how it works out. It certainly was not for me. I went in very innocently wanting to just learn more about God. And I came out with a whole bunch of questions ready to burn it all down.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I summarize it as we went to Bible college and came out of it with the desire to be less around Christians.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, what was Bible college like?
Look, as I said before, it was a culture shock.
Mm.
Because a lot of it was a non-denominational one,
Mhm.
but there were a lot of Anglican people there and Pentecostal people there, and a lot of complementarians and Calvinists, which was something I was like, the what?
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so it was eye-opening
Mm.
and I remember being like, because I was kind of there but not there, because I was there as a spouse,
Mm-hmm.
which usually it was the men doing the study and the women were there as support and raising. Obviously, the kids were a lot younger, most of them.
Because that's the only role a woman can play, right?
Yes, yes, of course.
Oh
And
boy.
so I'm there also studying, and the study load that we had, which
Hmm.
did you do full time?
I did.
It
Yes.
was hectic, 5,000 word assignments
Hmm.
for the weeks. And I was doing full time while Adrian was doing three-quarter time. And it was, I don't know how people do, I don't even know how I did it, but it was crazy. Aside from assessment and socializing for an introvert, we
Mm-hmm.
had, I was diagnosed with premenstrual dysphoric disorder. One child was diagnosed with ASD, ADHD,
Hmm.
another child with general anxiety. Adrian's ADHD assessment came later,
Yeah.
moved away. So we're all dealing with all this stuff, all
Mm.
unmedicated. Uh,
Yeah.
um, and then chuck into the fact that my background is environmental science, and science and Christianity don't always seem to, especially when I need to have an understanding of things like evolution.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking earlier when you said that you were in environmental science, I was like, I would have imagined that you were in the minority in terms of Christians being in an environmental science degree.
Oh, I was.
Yeah.
Um, there are a few, when I was at uni, there were a few of us who had had a similar sort of upbringing, um, but most of them had already left their faith or left the church, that sort of thing.
Mm.
But I just kind of reasoned it as being, or maybe God created an evolving world. Basically, how I just kind of went, I'm not even getting into that.
Yeah. Okay. What was it like for you? Now, I'm going to sort of provide a little contextual information for people who uh, don't know the Australian Christian landscape, which is you are at a Bible college in Sydney where there is a bunch of Sydney Anglicans. Okay. Now, I know this because I was so my gospel gap year was with the Sydney Anglicans. And so for some context, the Sydney Anglicans are known for being the single most conservative Christian group, probably in Australia, certainly the most conservative Anglicans in Australia. And they are it is like it is extreme.
It
It is
is.
extreme. Okay. So that might help why I'm asking this question, which is what was it like for you to interact with these type of people as a woman?
As a woman, oh, well, look, some of the men would just blank me.
Yeah.
Like, when they're willing to have a conversation about, oh, I'm studying theology as well.
Mm.
I've got thoughts on science and being a woman and parenting, and no, they would literally just blank me. Um, and maybe sometimes if my husband was there, they would talk to me. I don't know, maybe they thought I was going to try and jump in their pants.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
some of them would just blank me. Um, Others would just, uh, one of the main things that really peeved me, that really sticks in my mind, is I had a man younger than me. I figured out who he was, but he wanted to be anonymous, but got a brain that works.
Mhm.
I figured out who he was. He asked my husband to ask me to wear more high cut tops. So
Mm.
it was summer in Sydney, uh, and I don't do heat and humidity. I was wearing a top probably a bit like this one. There's a little tiny bit of
Yeah.
cleavage, but look, I have boobs. They exist. I'm not
Yeah.
going to wear a moo like,
Oh, okay.
and I was like, what? Because I've struggled with my body image
Mm.
most of my life, like especially after having kids. But this bloke just out of nowhere tried to get my husband, as if my husband owned me,
Mm-hmm.
to wear and to wear different clothes. And I just kind of went, what the fuck?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm thinking, are you freaking kidding me? Like,
It was
there
multiple.
is so many layers to that because, the fact that he even had the audacity to the sheer entitlement that you are responsible for his thoughts, which is essentially what purity culture is rooted
It
in.
is.
That, the burden of responsibility for men's lustful thoughts and desires is ours to hold.
Yeah.
Um, but the second being that he didn't actually just come to you, he had to go through your husband, like you said, as if you were his property or he owned you.
Yeah,
Uh,
he could tell me what to do, which
yeah, no. And purity culture, I think and I think this is not something that is talked about enough, to be fair, which is that purity culture and fat phobia are best
oh,
friends.
they
Like
are.
they are synonymous. They are like intertwined. My much, much thinner girlfriends, whilst I was in church, were allowed to wear singlets and I was not. And so you're right, they exist. Like it is just a body. And the reality, though, is that purity culture and that concept is inherently rooted in fat phobia as well.
It's ridiculous. I mean, so what I ended up doing was I wrote to this person who, at the time when I was writing, I didn't know who it was. But I
Mm.
was like, so I gave it to Adrian to give to whoever it was.
Oh my gosh, it's like, are we in high school?
And I essentially I said, that really hurt me.
Mm.
Please, if you've got an issue, talk to me like the adults that we are.
Mm.
I'm my own person. How do you cope if you go to the shops? Because, you know, women are wearing tiny little things or the beach. And then I said, well, I like men with nice eyes. So I think you probably need to wear dark sunglasses all the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, or make sure you cover your sleeves because a nice bicep, whew, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
out at the time, but I'm bisexual. And so I'm sitting here going, what does that mean? I'm not allowed to I can't look at anybody. I can't,
Mm.
no people allowed. I'm just,
Yeah.
how rude, how arrogant.
Yeah.
And
It's
that
absurd.
I tried to talk to a girl who I realize now was probably not the right person to talk to because she was also Sydney Anglican. And he was
Mm.
like, and she said, oh, he was probably just coming to it. He was trying to be really chivalrous and she was apologizing for him. She was his apologist.
Oh my goodness.
Pissed me off something chronic.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I am angry on your behalf, to be fair. I mean, aside from, like I said, the sheer entitlement, but also just like it's absurd. It's absurd.
I'm just here existing, mate. I'm not trying to jump in your pants.
Yeah. How did that impact your marriage? Like, did you have similar thoughts?
Yeah, we
Okay,
were on the same page. Adrian wasn't like, yeah, you should be listening. He was like, yeah, that's just weird.
good.
He's like, I thought I
Right.
should tell you because we'd been through a point about 5 years before where we nearly did divorce because it's a whole mess. But essentially, I nearly fucked up and
Okay.
nearly had an affair,
Yeah.
um, which is a whole different story. But we've always been since then really clear with our communication with each other, and if there was ever anything that we're struggling with or whatever. And so he was like, I don't know, I needed to tell you so I could say I've said it, but
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so there
Okay.
wasn't any stress on our marriage from that.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
what was it like when you finally finished Bible college and you got out of there? I'm imagining freedom was singing, but
You
what happened then?
we moved to live on site at a Christian campsite.
Yikes. Okay, so we're getting better. Um,
It was a beautiful setting, the most beautiful place I have ever lived, especially
yeah.
as an environmental scientist with also environmentally nutty kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful. But yeah, that lasted 7 months.
Okay. Right.
So
And I'm assuming that you guys were there because
Adrian was working
Adrian was working. Yeah, okay.
in the so he was working in the kitchen because he's got a hospitality background.
Right. Okay.
So the person who hired him was great, but then because he was great, he got promoted, which meant he go. Yeah, so we were living on campus, not on campus, on site at a campsite. Um, the new boss was totally what you would expect.
Mm.
Um, didn't bother to get to know Adrian, made a lot of assumptions about him and then just fired him one day because
Oh,
I was listening
wow.
to kitchen gossip.
Okay.
Then when I went down there, I went like, "What the hell?" He was like, "Oh, we'll pray for you,"
Ugh.
and I was like, "You freaking what?"
Yeah. Okay.
It also meant
So,
we had no income and nowhere to live.
yeah, completely in the lurch, like just dropped.
Yeah, 2 weeks notice, off you go.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, trying to find a rental with because that was another thing is that living on faith, we've
Mm.
never really had a lot of money.
No, because you're not supposed to, right?
No, you're not supposed to. You're not supposed to be
Yeah.
comfortable because if you're comfortable, then are you really living for God?
Yeah.
Um, and also, yeah, getting married and having kids young, you don't get a lot of money. You don't do the saving and the buying of property. So yeah, we had to try and find a rental in a state that we'd only lived in for 7 months with, hardly any references. But we got a place for 3 months and that was enough.
Yeah.
But that was stressful.
Yeah. What was that like for your family?
I swear I had some sort of trauma from that. Every time Adrian would ring me or text me out of the blue while he
Yeah.
was at work, I'd freak out thinking he's been fired again.
Mm.
Or something bad has happened. Like, and the kids were really stressed. Like, we'd already moved them to Sydney and then to Victoria. And one of them, as I mentioned, is a very anxious person. The other one's autism spectrum.
Mm.
And these are kids who, so one of them was at the start of high school, and the other one was at the tail end of primary school. So just trying to support these kids through this when they are at the point where they're starting to understand things like finances, they're starting to understand things like sexism and racism and homophobia, and they're starting to think about things for themselves.
Yeah.
And at the time, we were going to a church which was itself just starting to change. So it had been an independent evangelical sort of home church, very
Mhm.
kind of small. And then it suddenly changed. It got a new pastor, for want of a better term. And there'd been another church in the town which had split because they'd decided actually women could be in leadership.
Mhm.
And all the ones who went, oh no, came to the church that we were going to.
Of course. Okay.
So the church was, you know, I think they helped us move. Like everyone came and picked stuff up and moved
Mm.
us along. And in that way, they were supportive. But I kind of just went, oh,
Mm.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much change, especially for, like you said, one with anxiety, one with autism, and change. And those two things are not friends. I mean, I have anxiety myself, and I know that change is incredibly hard to adapt to, particularly when one, it's spontaneous and there's no build up, and two, when it's completely out of your control.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, that,
yeah.
so my youngest has struggled for years from that.
Mm.
They were already an anxious person,
Yeah.
but that just really threw them. And then we had to move again. So there was 12 months within which we moved three times. Once was interstate.
Oh my goodness.
The other one was just down the road. But it was so like the carpet was ripped out from under your feet.
Yeah.
And of course, in the middle of that, there was financial. I wasn't working. Um, Adrian was doing what he did. I think he worked like 7 shifts at a nut packing factory. Like
Random.
random, but it was pay. Like,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
and it was chaotic. And I think at one point, I just remember sitting in the living room of the middle house in that year because there were 3 houses that year. I think we'd just found out we had to move. Adrian was still looking for work. And I just remember screaming at God. Like, I was just like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
Like, he's supposed to be there for us, to support us, to show us, to
Mm.
what is this? What am I supposed to learn from this? Because that's what we're always taught that if you're going through hard times, it's God doesn't want you to be stagnating or God doesn't
Teaching
want,
you.
he just wants you to be learning or you need to be,
Mm.
you're not having faith enough and it was so frustrating and it was scary trying to support kids
Yeah.
emotionally as well as just, let's eat some food and have
Mm.
um and it was that really I think was probably when I really started to question a lot of the stuff that you get taught in churches. I was just like, so what if you're going to be Christian you have to be poor and stressed all the time? Like, and
Yeah.
you have to disregard your mental health. And
Yeah.
what? It doesn't make any sense.
It's like extreme humility
Yeah.
almost. It's like excessive
Like,
humility.
um, if Jesus died for you, you can die for Jesus.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I was talking to somebody else and they were like, how many times did you hear the phrase die to self? Like, die, die, die. It's like, we live, but also die. And it's just the most, ironic. It's the most ironic thing. But the reality is, whether you were moving up the road or across the state, the emotional upheaval is the same.
Yeah, it's, I mean, it was crazy. I
Yeah.
at that time, and I had, like, we were living nowhere near any family, had vague sort of friends in the church, but we were just a bit untethered.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was thankful for the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. The internet is, I mean, it's a double-edged sword a little bit sometimes, but when you are isolated and alone, it is a wonderful source of connection.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a really stressful period of time.
Mm. Yeah. What was it like for your family for you even to start having some of those big, like, faith altering almost questions?
I think it sort of coincided with there was a whole coincidental thing. I realized, actually, no, not everyone finds women attractive. So,
Hmm.
no, actually,
Yeah.
so I realized I was bi. My kids were figuring things out for themselves regarding their sexuality.
Mm,
Um, there was COVID,
mm,
and we then weren't going to church, and we actually really enjoyed not going to church.
yeah.
Um, and I think it went all right for us as a family. In part, it was a relief,
Mm,
I think, because we realized that none of us felt good in church settings.
yeah.
Adrian was used for, like, using worship leading because he's musical,
Hmm.
or he knows his way around a sound system.
Hmm.
So he was able, church we're at, they used him for that. But even though he had more theological training than a lot of the other people there, he wasn't allowed to preach. And that's because we were considered to be too, what's the word, left leaning, too progressive, because we've always been allies, LGBT, rainbow.
Hmm.
We've always, and I'm a scientist. I just
Hmm.
remember at one point, just, when you're walking around in a church setting, you hear people talking, and I just heard two men, that's probably my mistake, talking to each other about, these Christian scientists. And I just went, oh, Christian scientists? We don't exist. And they kind of just looked at me like I'd sprouted another head. I mean,
Yeah.
it might have been because I just butted into their conversation. But
Mm,
like, they didn't bother, nobody bothered to get to know me.
mm,
Um, it felt
yeah.
like beyond being a wife and a mother.
Mm.
So, what was the question again?
I
Yeah, no,
have
we,
no idea.
as a family, we went all right because we all kind of, there wasn't just one of us
Mm,
deconstructing or questioning at the one time. It was all kind of bouncing things off.
yeah.
So, I mean, my kids grew up watching David Attenborough, for example.
Mm,
So they were, at least chill with the idea of dinosaurs and evolution and stuff. And I wasn't going to be like, no, no. So they'd go to church and be the ones who were going, dinosaurs, evolution.
right.
Other people would be like, no, there's only 6,000 years in the earth. And my kids would be the ones like me when I was a kid going, how come we're not all inbred? Like, just
Hmm.
um,
Yeah. I mean, and my initial thought was, and yet the non-weird thing for kids to watch was vegetables singing about Jesus. Oh, and I know you know what that is without me even saying. But for people who don't know, I'm referring to the phenomenon of Veggie Tales, which is just the weirdest thing. I mean, YouTube it. It's just the weird. I mean, fair warning though, it's creepy as.
whack.
Um, it is absolutely whack. It's so weird, and yet, your kids talking about dinosaurs was. the abnormal.
Yeah. I remember them. My eldest was mad about the How to Train Your Dragon movies.
Yeah.
The Spectrum,
Mhm.
they were a happy thing for them.
Mm.
And so they wanted to paint dragons on something at Sunday school. I think they were making a go-kart. I don't know why. Um, but they couldn't because dragons are of the devil. But particularly they cited a verse in Revelation where there's a woman riding a dragon or something. And I was always like, oh, does that mean we also can't depict women and apples?
Yeah.
I was always the one who was going to ask the annoying questions. Even at Bible college, like I remember someone being like, oh, women can't be in leadership. And I was like, why?
Mm.
What's wrong with boobs? Like,
Yeah.
why can't we be in leadership? And they're like, oh, but it says in the Bible. I'm like, yeah, it also says that, if my husband dies, I need to marry my brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
why do we
Exactly.
pick and choose?
Yeah. I mean, get rid of like your whole wardrobe because you're not supposed to mix like what is that verse about mixing?
Uh, Fibers, yeah.
Yeah, mixing
And
like
don't eat
oh,
the surf and turf. All this
exactly.
wine.
So, oh my goodness. Okay. And
So
so through COVID, you guys were not at church.
we were not at church and we really started to deconstruct. And
Yeah.
that was because my youngest had been dating a boy in the youth group.
Mm-hmm.
And they broke up just before COVID. And so my youngest was pretty depressed
Mm-hmm.
um, and mopey. They've always been very extroverted,
Mm-hmm.
and at least on the surface. But then it turned out, so one day I get a phone call from the school saying in their journal they've written about they've been assaulted,
Okay.
and it's become a police matter,
Right.
and because of the school's mandatory reporting,
Mm.
and it had been not the boyfriend, uh, a random boy at youth group had assaulted my child, um, and so that changed how we looked at the last 6 months of
Mm.
that behavior, but also then talking to the police. No one, we didn't end up pressing charges, um, but they went and talked to the young fella partly to hopefully give him a fright. So we
Mm.
never did that again.
Mm.
But having to go to the parents of this person and say, your child assaulted my child in a sexual way,
Yeah.
like, and they were high up in the church, and to them have them go, like, I mean, I don't know what I would do if it was the other way around and out of the blue
Yeah.
someone said that. Like, they're going to have a bit of shock themselves, but for them to sort of just go, oh, I was like, okay, there's no, it didn't, maybe it just took them through them for six. Um,
Mm.
that was kind of the last time we saw them, which is fine because my kid didn't want to see their kid.
Yeah, and rightly so.
No, like, but that was kind of like the second last straw
Mm.
for the hat for the going to church, and the other being that we were essentially told that we would be denied communion because we were LGBT affirming.
Oh, I have like a visceral reaction to that because I know that feeling
Yep,
all too well.
yep,
It is, yeah, okay.
yep, and that's um,
Mm.
not. There was a person who was trans, and we were using the pronouns and name that they chose,
Mhm.
as you do, in my mind, as you
Because you are a respectful human.
but that was not okay.
Okay.
We just kind of went, no, that, and my eldest was shamed in front of the youth group for believing in dinosaurs and evolution and had their faith questioned, which is where like, well, actually, we might just question that.
Yeah.
So all of those things, it was this whole shit fight
Yeah.
of everything, and we just kind of went. I was becoming more aware of my own neurodivergence, I suppose you could say. I don't know exactly what my letters are,
Mhm.
but there's something going on.
Yeah. Yep.
And I couldn't cope with the church setting. It was just overwhelming. The fakeness,
Mhm.
the noise, no.
The performance. Yeah.
And I just went, no,
Mm.
knowing. And my kids have, or our kids have just blossomed into who
Mm.
they are.
Yeah.
We, our relationship is so much better for it.
Mm.
Um, we spend our Sundays gardening
Mm.
and talking, and sometimes we just lay in bed. God might get mentioned, but more in a haha kind of way.
Yeah.
Like, like it's just um, it's just been so much better for us to
Yeah.
not have that. I mean, it's been stressful, and there's been a lot of unloading, or and talking through things together. And I think if I had a counselor, I'd probably be like bleh at them. But that's hard to find at the moment where I am. And kind of just had to drag ourselves through it.
Mm.
I talked to other ex-evangelicals
Mm.
online, um, and there's so many similar stories. Some of them are horrific, and
Yeah.
my trauma, I'm fine, but it is still my trauma. My
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as soon as we start to compare trauma stories, we're down the wrong path because, we know that what is traumatic for one is not necessarily for another. And I mean, if we know anything about the church, it's that they don't handle the queer community very well, and they don't handle sexual assault or sexual abuse very well. And so to have those as a double whammy,
yeah,
it, of course, that's going to be, I guess, the nail in the coffin, so to speak.
yeah. We had one of my kids sexually assaulted.
Mm,
My other kid is in the LGBT.
yeah,
They were like, oh no,
yeah,
like that is not even. We didn't feel there was any place for us there, and we were essentially told there wasn't a place for us
yeah,
not there. We've tried going to other churches since because of the whole feel like you should go to church.
mm-hmm.
My husband had like a panic attack a couple
Yeah,
of times just walking through the door.
yeah,
So it's not just me and my kids, it's all of us.
yeah.
Um, and I was just like, why am I here? Like,
Mhm.
and now I'm like, I just have no, I don't even know if I still, where I sit with faith.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, often I ask this question, but I tend to ask it not using the word faith because for a lot of people it is really it's a loaded term.
yeah,
But where does your sense of spirituality land? Because spirituality and faith are different.
definitely. I'm definitely still probably, well, definitely probably. I'm still a fairly spiritual person. I do believe that there is a spiritual aspect to life, definitely. I think it is partly just a way that humans try and understand things we don't understand. It's like I don't know why that maybe it's just God, or it's just the universe is just the way it is.
Yeah.
Um, being an like environmental scientist, I can look at the world and just feel joy in seeing that nature. Um,
I mean, for a lot of people, nature is inherently spiritual.
uh-huh. I mean, it's so interwoven.
Yeah.
I don't see how you can look at nature and not feel some sort of something amazing.
Mm.
I I guess if there was a like a local Quaker meeting, I'd
Mhm.
really want to investigate that because they focus mostly on just the teachings of Jesus, and it's just a quiet get together. And my understanding, I've had a little bit of interaction with them, is they're pretty rainbow community friendly. A lot
Yeah.
of them are, and so
Mm.
but my concept of spirituality now, it's kind of warm fuzzies when I look at my husband and feel so much love because there's so much understanding between us,
Mm.
and joy when I see my kids doing well, and when I see one with their partner and they're just so well matched,
Yeah.
and joy in just laughing at silly things, joy
Mm.
in sex, joy in yummy food and gaining too much weight.
Yeah.
But like, it's just finding joy in things and
Mm.
not feeling like I shouldn't.
Mm.
Because sometimes there was a lot of like, you can't enjoy good food, you can't,
Mm.
it was the guilt of gluttony, or you know, there's no that guilt. It's not loaded. It's just a simple enjoyment of life, of connecting, of my husband and I sort of going, hey, she's kind of cute, or you know,
Yeah. How good is it when you I mean, I obviously have that as well.
yeah,
I have the we get to bond over being attracted to the same type of people, which is nice.
yeah,
Oh, I
it is
mean, it
kind of nice.
sounds like it's the little things. And I think, spirituality is largely introspective, which is
Yeah.
everything that Christianity is not, because it's obviously all about God and it's about an external authority and the external
Mm.
leaders and things like that. Whereas spirituality is inherently introspective and it's about you and those small pleasures and life.
Mm.
So I love that.
I think, I mean, a lot of it to me comes down to love, which
Mm,
does come in line with a lot of the Christian teaching. Jesus says,
yeah.
love one another, love God. But I'm
Hmm.
like, to love each other,
Mm,
but then also to love yourself.
yeah.
But and through that love is, the acceptance of other people, and but also being strong to put up boundaries and say, no, that's not okay. That's sort of,
Yeah.
and it never felt like it was okay to have boundaries when we're deep in that Christian mode. Like,
Mhm.
to have boundaries was to lock out community and to lock out God, to harden your heart.
Mm.
No, it's just not being a doormat.
Yeah. Yeah.
For yourself and respect
Absolutely.
for other people.
Yeah.
That was,
And it starts with you, right? I think
yeah,
this is the second time I've quoted RuPaul, the drag queen, in my
yeah,
episodes. And like his tagline at the end of an episode is, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love someone else?
precisely. Thank you, RuPaul.
Hmm. It
Like,
starts with you.
yeah, like you can't pour from an empty cup. That cliche, but it's so
Oh,
true.
yeah. Yeah.
Because when people speak hate to others or of others, you think, how are they thinking of themselves?
Mm,
What's their frame of life?
yeah.
How do
Absolutely.
they see things? It doesn't mean I sit here and you know, shitting glitter or something, but
Yeah.
like, you got to have empathy. And I think before you can have empathy, there's got to be love.
Yeah, absolutely. And love, I think, just for humanity and not seeing them as inherently broken from the
Oh,
start. And I
that
think
was,
that is, that's obviously what the gospel is based upon, which is that you are inherently broken and you need saving. And I think when we can shift our lens to not see people as inherently broken, then our perspective changes quite a bit. So,
yeah. I mean, we have broken behaviors
yeah,
or we
absolutely. Yeah.
have attitudes, things, but we're not inherently broken. Like,
No.
to be sitting there and be told that simply by existing,
Mm,
we are dirt, trash,
yeah,
worthy of the
yeah,
atrocity. Like, it's so wrong.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, I am finishing all of these episodes by asking, what would you say to somebody who has just started questioning, just started their process of deconstruction, they're out of the church and they're deep in it? What would you say to them?
I would say there's no such thing as a stupid question.
Mm,
And there's always just got to be more questions.
yeah.
Love yourself, love others,
Mm.
and let's see if we can catch up for a cuppa sometime if you want.
Yeah, I had somebody answer that question with "Welcome to the dark side," which I loved. It's like, join the club. We are all a friendly bunch. But I love that. There's no stupid question because what you will have is lots of questions, and all of them are equal and valid and important. So I love that. There is no stupid question. Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Surface. Until next time, take care, stay true to who you are, and remember, your voice and your story matters, always.